Dr. Vimo, welcome back to the Montclair pod. It's been a year since we spoke, and boy, have things escalated.
Indeed.
Well, we wanted to have you on the show because since you were last on the show, we had predictions about what might happen with regards to the new administration's take on immigration and how far they were going to take these federal raids. First, just tell us what you're hearing and seeing. You go to campus every day at Montclair State University.
I mean, I think just quite simply, there's fear, there's confusion, really it's an environment of terror for a lot of students, either because they're worried about themselves or their family members. And I think, one of the things that we know is that there's a very large number of what we call mixed status families in the United States, where you have the child born in the United States and therefore is a U.S. citizen, but the parents may not have lawful status. So, it's the impact on the students is really not just their personal impact, but the impact on their families and their communities more broadly.
How are you seeing that affect the day-to-day lives? I mean, we're hearing, for example, in Minnesota, people are getting escorted to school, right? Or they're not going to school, or they're not going to work. The community is stepping up to protect them, to guard them. What are you seeing happening on campus? What are you hearing?
So far, there haven't been any ICE actions on campus. I do know that, some students so far, I haven't talked to any students individually who have stopped coming to class, but I have talked to students whose parents are sheltering in place and not going to work. And that has a huge impact on the household, of course.
These are local folks in New
Yep.
Jersey,
Students at Montclair State University. Yep.
but the parents too are
The
also New
parents too.
Jersey.
Yep. Here
Yeah.
in New Jersey. Yep.
There was some talk a while ago where you heard murmurings of the administration trying to change the rules of birthright citizenship so these kids actually would somehow have their citizenship revoked.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in general is a scary thing, even for me personally. I'm the child of Argentine immigrants. And even though I know the law very well, I will say that, when those announcements were made, I did call my parents and ask them about what their immigration status was when I was born, which is just a ridiculous thing because I'm clearly a U.S. citizen under the Constitution. And the fact that a person with a PhD in immigration law, would have to even think twice about it really speaks to how widespread these attacks are on everyone with an immigrant background. Even those of us born in the U.S. who are clearly U.S. citizens.
And so, speaking of the law, I would love for you to just refresh us on the rights that we have still, despite there being some confusion, whether ICE needs a warrant and this and that. And so, would love to hear a little bit more about that. What's important for people to be reminded of right now, whether you're an immigrant or
Absolutely.
not, because we all are in this together.
And one of the things my students often say is, well, the Constitution doesn't protect immigrants. And actually, that's not true because there are certain protections in the Constitution that are specific to citizens, but there are also many parts of the Constitution and many protections that are for people. And that wasn't an accident. When the founders were writing the Constitution, they made a clear set of rights and protections that were for all people, regardless of whether or not they were citizens, and then certain rights that were reserved for citizens. I would say the most important sort of rights that people should keep in mind are one, the Fifth Amendment, which is the right to remain silent. I think that the biggest thing that we try and teach when we do Know Your Rights trainings is a lot of the time, people are in a situation where they're facing ICE or a police officer and they get scared because it's scary. They have guns and they kind of will have a tendency to just want to give explanations and talk and say a lot of things. And one of the things they may not realize is something as innocuous as sharing what country you were born in. It could be used against you in an immigration removal proceeding. And so, we really, really, really emphasize that folks, when interacting with law enforcement, exercise their right to remain silent, ask to speak to an attorney, and don't sign anything. Because a frequent thing that ICE will do is they'll say, here, sign this piece of paper and we'll let you go back to your family. Well, the piece of paper in most cases is a deportation order. And they're signing their own deportation order. I think the other important thing to remember is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, and I thought I'd just sort of read it because I mean, it's a little long, but the Fourth Amendment states that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, with no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So what that means is, long story short, the government cannot just barge into your home whenever they want. Your home is considered your most private space. It's deserving of the highest level of constitutional protection. And it's important that this warrant be signed by a judge, right? And so, I think that there are three factors that the Fourth Amendment states is: one, the warrant requires independent review, which means someone outside of law enforcement, namely a judge, has to be the one who decides whether or not this is an appropriate warrant. Two, it has to demand probable cause. It can't just be on the whim, or you look brown and therefore we should be able to enter your house. And then finally, it limits the search in terms of what it can do. So one of the things that we do in our Know Your Rights trainings is advise immigrant families or families that have immigrants in them to not open the door unless the law enforcement official gives you a signed judicial warrant. Now, one of the things that ICE has started to do is, instead of giving a judicial warrant, is they've been slipping under the door what they call administrative warrants, which are not the same. They don't meet Fourth Amendment protections. Administrative warrant is just signed by the ICE officer, him or herself, right? So it's kind of like a writing your own permission slip to get out of class. And I think that ICE is trying to, right now in May 2025, ICE issued an internal memo authorizing immigration officials to be able to enter houses without judicial warrants. And this is going to be stuck in the courts for a long time. But I think that everyone should know that this is sort of unacceptable, because no judge is reviewing that decision. The ICE officers themselves are issuing the warrants, and we shouldn't have the same agency who wants to make the arrest be the one that's authorizing entry. So, I think those things are really important. It is also important to remember, especially given what just happened in Jersey City a couple of days ago, Sunday of the first week of February, which was that the warrant requirement does not apply to public spaces. So, for example, Jersey City Councilman Jake Efros was confronting ICE agents who were arresting people at the light rail station, and they were arresting people without a warrant. And the agents basically told the councilman, "We don't need a warrant." I think specifically it was, "We don't need a warrant, bro."
Right.
was the phrase. And technically they were correct in that situation.
Right. Montclair is not a technical sanctuary city, but we share the goals of sanctuary cities. Can you explain what that actually means in practice? Like, what does that mean?
The sanctuary city just basically means that local law enforcement isn't cooperating with federal immigration agents on immigration enforcement, right? Because immigration enforcement is not criminal. Committing not having lawful immigration status is not technically a crime. I think people get very confused about that. It's more similar to a traffic ticket, right? So how many of us have ever, gotten a parking ticket or a traffic ticket, right? Does that mean we are criminals, right? I think that's a common sort of misperception. And, I think that what cities have realized over many years, and why law enforcement agencies across the country have supported, in many cases, these sanctuary policies, is that it makes it harder for them to do their jobs when they have residents being scared to interact with them. So if, for example, an immigrant witnesses a murder or a crime of some kind, they're going to be terrified to go report to the local police officer if they think that that's going to result in some immigration consequences. And so, we have a very clear division in the law that the federal government enforces immigration law, and state and local officials are going to be enforcing state and local criminal laws. And that there seems to be some confusion about that, increasingly, but the law is clear.
Is that what they're doing? That ICE is basically reviewing anybody who's here, and if they have any kind of law enforcement action on their records. They're basically using that as a technicality to revoke their essentially their permission to be here.
There's a lot of things going on, and we are not going to know the full extent of it probably for a while now. But a few things are going on. One is they are just going after people that don't have any contact with law enforcement. So that's happening. Two, they are going after people who have lawful status, who might even have a green card and who got caught for, I don't know, marijuana possession of, a joint 30 years ago before
Hmm.
the laws were different. And coming back and reopening their case. And so a lot of people, anyone who is an immigrant who is not a US citizen really should, if they've had any contact with law enforcement in the past, should probably consult an immigration attorney right now,
Mhm.
unfortunately, even though these things were far in the past.
Are they going after people that, as far as you know, that haven't had any dealings with law enforcement and are here on a green card, are allowed to be here, but they're just snatching them up anyway?
Well, they've deported US citizens. And so not just they've definitely grabbed green card holders and they've definitely grabbed US citizens and deported them to countries that they have no familiarity with. So, I don't want to raise alarms to unreasonable points, but I think that even one case of a US citizen being deported should be very, very concerning from, basic protections and basic rights of citizens. Basic and also basic, protections also for immigrants who are green card holders who have lawful permission to be in this country.
So should we be walking around with our passports?
No, actually, well, if you're a US citizen, you should not be necessarily walking around with your passport. And the law is very clear that we don't have to carry our passports as US citizens. But if someone is an immigrant, is here on a student visa, is here on any kind of visa, they are legally required to carry that proof with them. However, if someone is undocumented, we recommend that they carry, if they have, for example, in the state of New Jersey, everyone, regardless of immigration status, can get a driver's license. And we recommend that they carry sort of a driver's license, but not necessarily that they carry, for example, Mexicans have a matricula consular issued by the Mexican consulate. We don't recommend that those be carried around with them. But they should carry some kind of documentation, in particular if people have been here for more than 2 years. Not that it matters anymore, but if people have been here for a while and they have documentation that proves that they've been here for a few years, we do recommend that they be carrying that.
And maybe a last question. We've reached out to the Montclair Police Department. We're really curious to understand where they stand on all of this, what they're seeing, their preparation in the event of an unlawful raid here in town. What are the organizations? You mentioned, an immigration attorney, but before it gets to that, if you're somebody who senses there's like some problems going on in an area, there is activity, there is you anticipate maybe there's going to, because now we're sharing things. This is what the governor wants us to do. And there's social media and so there's like some level of transparency happening, which is good and also potentially problematic. We've talked about it on our show. But in any case, who can we call in the event that we fear something is imminent?
I mean, so in terms of organizations, there are a lot of organizations that are working on this. There's the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. There's the American Friends Service Committee. There's Make the Road New Jersey. There's the ACLU of New Jersey. There are quite a number of organizations that are working in the New Jersey area. A lot of the rapid response networks that have emerged, similar to the ones that we saw in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, are local, and they're kind of happening through local signal threads where people are sort of texting with each other. And those exist, but they all are very, so far there hasn't been like a statewide, I can't give you a statewide number to call, but I would definitely, reach out to, feel free to reach out to me or other folks if you're looking for a particular local, rapid response network to plug into, because they do exist.
This is something that Governor Sherrill raised on her appearance on The Daily Show, which we talked about. on our last episode, which was she said the state was going to be standing up some sort of clearinghouse where people can upload video and report where they're seeing ice. And that obviously, as you noted, occurs informally in social media and on Reddit and places like that. People are posting stuff. What do you know anything about the state's plans? And we also thought that there's a chance for this is like a form of counterintelligence. And you could even imagine like ICE posting fake stuff on there too, like just it getting very messy. And so wondering what you think about all of that ecosystem that's developing of this.
I think that there are definitely dangers, 100%. And we've definitely seen that ICE does not play by the rules and has tended to do things like spread misinformation. There's also a lot of everyone is at such a high level of anxiety right now that we're seeing a lot of cases where people will just see someone. I mean, I'm on probably 20 different Signal threads where every 10 seconds someone's like, I saw ICE, they're on the corner. It turned out it was just some guy contractor on his way to work, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so there are procedures that each rapid response network uses to try and avoid creating an environment of hysteria, right? Because that doesn't help anyone either, right? And also just flooding these Signal threads with reports of people who you think are ICE just because they're wearing Oakley blades or something,
Nobody can wear like full face ski masks
yeah,
anymore.
even though it's like 10 degrees outside, like, be careful wearing masks, right? It's a wild time to be around. I think in general it's a good thing. It can be helpful. We've seen that they've been both effective and also obviously targeted in Minneapolis, but I think that we'd have to wait to see the specifics. I'm not privy to any inside info about what the sort of state system would look like. But I think, we should welcome any attempt, efforts by the state to try and sort of create resources for people to come together to share information.
Dr. Vimo, thank you so much. Stay close. We'll have you back, I'm sure, and appreciate everything you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Have a great day and stay warm.
Thank you.